In that case, then, if I would ask you, what practical evidence are there that the not too young to run law is sufficient enough to take this to a practical level from the papers?
Well, first of all, it's allowed me to contest. I'm 38 years old. So that's the first step. A law is a law. You need many other tools to enforce it. You need resources, isn't it, to implement it, to promote it and protect the law. So I do accept that, yes, the law is the first step, but then that's where we come out. We don't say, okay, let's sit down and wait for something else to happen, isn't it? So we need to build the infrastructure of human capital, human intelligence. And by the way, let me clarify something about in terms of what team you need to have. The team we need now for Nigeria is not just a team of people who have been there with experiences that has not worked for Nigeria. We're talking about a team of people who are ready to get things done. The track record of getting things done, not the experience of being in different kinds of offices. I don't accept that.
You talked about resources.
Yeah.
But in practical terms, what resources are you referring to when someone like you, for instance, you can imagine some other people who are also wanting to run for president or even other offices, what kinds of, what do they need, really?
I think first they need the electoral capital, in addition to political capital. Yeah? The money is the least thing they need. They may disagree from their experience. The electoral capital is the first and the most strongest. The money will come. If we change the way our electoral system works, the money will come, and we can change it. If 25 million young people get out and decide to vote in these elections, they will change that system. That's what we need to do. How do we get them to the elections? This is the beginning. The law has given the opportunity for a hope to emerge, and that's the hope we are running with.
Honorable Bush, you're the man with experience in this case. Do you disagree with that?
Honestly, I really appreciate your boldness. I do respect it. However, please permit me to have a bit of a different view here. He had said earlier on that if you can vote at 18, you should be able to contest at 18. I respect it as well, but I don't agree. When you look at the military, you can join the military, you're allowed to join the military at 18, but you will not become a general at 18 in the military. And I think that applies in this case as well. That's number one. Number two, Nigeria comes first in this situation. So when we do our analysis, we have to take into consideration how does it impact the Nigerian lives. I will tell you how I mean, what I mean. I believe that experience matters, but where do you start from? The kind of, when you look around the world and you look at democracies that have really thrived or that are thriving, you look at England, you look at Austria, you would see that they're democracies that practice true parliamentary system. They're elected into parliament, they serve a few years, from there they become prime ministers. So you can actually see.
So that system is different from what we have as a presidential system?
It's different. There's a difference, and I'll tell you, it's not too far apart, but I'll tell you what the practice is. The practice is what I'm talking about. Whoever becomes president, before David Cameron became president, everybody knew what he stood for. Everybody knew what he supported, whether he supported gay rights, whether he supported education. Everybody knew, so they knew and understood what he could do. But in our case here, we don't know who the candidate will be until a couple of months to elections. We don't know who emerges until a few months to elections. Now, there are people out there whose job, there are companies whose job is to make people look good. Now, the candidate is taken, presented to the nation, made to look good, which means that you are basing your decision to elect leadership without actually knowing a lot about them. I'm not exempting myself, I'm also a part of the system. But I'm saying when Nigeria comes first is something we have to change. And that's why I am a proponent. I would, please, I would say that I would rather a lot of young people right now fill up the parliamentary space, gather experience from there, either as a councillor, as a state assembly member, as a National Assembly member. It doesn't mean that we won't have that exception like my brother here. We would have one or two, a few of those, but how well do we know the people we're voting for?
So the experience you referred to in your opening submission is experience in local politics, not necessarily with
whether local. See, there's a difference. We need to understand that there's a difference between power and leadership. Being in power doesn't make you a great leader. You may have the leadership skills, you may have gone through the understanding, and that's why we see that leaders who emerge in successful democracies have been groomed right from the onset. Take a look at the Canadian experience. The Prime Minister's father was a Prime Minister. If I'm right, I think even his grandfather was a Prime Minister. So he had already been groomed from the onset.
By association?
Well, whether by association, whether by whichever way. I always told my father I wanted to be a politician at the age of, at age of 8, I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to design houses. At 17, I wanted to be a politician. And I had been preparing myself for the future. What is education? We're not sure what the future has, but what you do is you prepare yourself for whatever life throws at you. And that's why till date, I'm still studying. I still keep going back to study. Now, when you look at those who have been leaders in our country today, you see that none of them went to private, majority did not go to public schools. Most of them come from humble beginnings. How do we, in the process of electing who would lead, we should know what they have planned. What is their plan for those public schools? That is where leaders emerge from. Should we start leadership training right from those public schools?
So, do you think that Etim will succeed becoming president of the Federal Republic if he doesn't go through those channels that you've mentioned?
Well, I'm not a pastor, nor am I an imam, but I can tell you that for the young people who will vote, they have to be sure they've been battered and bruised. It's not enough for one to be young. I'm not saying he doesn't have the capacity or the experience. But before I buy any product right now, young people go online, they check the reviews. If he has good reviews, then he would have the opportunity, I mean, they could vote for him. It's their decision, but certain things are taken into consideration before making the decision to elect a leader.
Even though many will say, look, those reviews you're talking about, are they the people who vote? Those are two different things if you talk about, that sounds like an ideal situation, doesn't it?
Not at all. One of the things, look, 1 million people are registered to vote. 150,000 eventually end up voting. Why do you think that is?
Okay.
We have a system, I'm sorry, we have a system. They look and say, is this what I'm voting for? I'd rather stay at home on election day.
All right, we'll take up from that point, and they've just been nodded away. We'll find out why when we come back in a moment. Don't go away.